Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Boston Borough Council's Planning Committee. My name is Councillor David Middleton and I am the chairman of this committee. And as my official vice chairman is unable to attend this meeting today, I have asked Councillor Barry Pierpoint to support me in that role for this meeting. Thank you, Councillor Pierpoint. This meeting is being streamed live and it is also the first meeting of this newly convened membership, which does include a number of newly elected councillors, including myself. Whilst all have undertaken the statutory training required, experience of public speaking and addressing formal meetings is still relatively new to some members. As such, I would ask for understanding from all parties in supporting the new councillors during this initial meeting. Should we move to the agenda, I would is that right? I'm right there? Oh, sorry, before we move to the agenda, I would invite our officers supporting this meeting to introduce themselves, and we start to my right.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Martha Rees. I'm here from Legal Services Lincolnshire as solicitor for the council and the planning committee. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emma Turvey, planner.
Good morning, my name's Abby Marwood. I'm the Deputy Development Manager for Boston Borough Council.
Good morning, members. Mike Gildersleeves, Assistant Director for Planning and Strategic Infrastructure across the partnership.
Good morning, Karen Risk, Committee Clerk. Thank you, Chairman.
We're moving on to housekeeping now. So now we move on to the housekeeping rules. Restroom facilities are available on this floor for the ladies and halfway down the main stairwell for gentlemen. In the event of a fire alarm sounding, officers will escort everyone to the nearest safety point in the rear car park. Please ensure when you are addressing this meeting that you do so through the microphone so that everybody can hear as we are live streaming, and it also helps people with hearing deficiency sometimes. Members of the public are free to leave the meeting at any time, and our support officers who are at the back there will escort you downstairs. Please be advised that abuse or intimidation of any kind will not be tolerated in this committee meeting today or any other day. Anyone who is deemed to breach this requirement will be warned and asked to refrain, and if the behaviour persists, they will be asked to leave the meeting. Thank you. We will now move into part 1 of the agenda and address the preliminary items. To receive apologies for absence and notifications of any substitutions.
Thank you, Chairman. We have one apology this morning from Councillor Scoot, with Councillor Andorian substituting. Thank you.
Point 2, to sign the minutes of the last meeting held on the 23rd of February 2023. As we do not have a quorum of members who sat on the committee at that meeting to agree the minutes, I will sign the minutes as seen. Point 3, before we move to individual declarations of interest in respect of any items on the agenda, I will ask Karen to give the standing declarations.
Thank you, Chairman. For public information, I would confirm that standing declarations of interest will be recorded within the minutes for this meeting for all members of this committee who are also members of Lincolnshire County Council, members of the South East Lincolnshire Joint Strategic Planning Committee, and representatives of the Internal Drainage Boards. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Does any other member have any further declaration of interest to make in respect of any item on this agenda, please? Councillor Broughton.
With reference to part 2, agenda item 2, I've had communications on this matter, but I'm here with an open and clear mind. Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome to your role. With regard to the final application, I think the firewood one, I am acquainted with the applicant, but I think what's the saying, I wouldn't expect to be invited to his daughter's wedding. I'm just acquainted with him because he lives within Witherton.
Yes, Chairman. With regard to the last application, David Smith, of Pilgrim Auctions, is a friend of mine on Facebook, but in all honesty, I've never met the man or communicated with him. I think it's merely the fact that he lives in Fishtoft. But just a point.
Thank you, Helen. Councillor Dorian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With respect to item number B230005, I believe I met the applicant when I tried to buy a Christmas tree last Christmas. But other than that, I can judge this with an open mind. And with regard to B230491, I do believe I met the applicant and his wife a couple of times socially when Councillor Brian Rush was the mayor. However, I haven't seen or met them in the last 6 or 7 years, and certainly can judge this with an open mind. Thank you.
Okay. So the next point is to receive any written questions from members of the public.
No questions, Chairman.
So that concludes the preliminary items. We will now move into part 2 of the agenda and receive the reports tabled. Our first item today is planning application B/23/0005 on page 9 of the agenda and will be presented by Ms. Abby Marwood.
Thank you, Chairman. Yep, this application is a proposal for 4 static holiday caravans located at Green Lane, Algakirk. It is located in the open countryside in an area of woodland, which is shown in red on the PowerPoint. It's approximately 1 kilometre from the nearest settlement, and it's currently used in conjunction with the firewood business, which is located opposite Red Barn Lane. So the site plan shows the proposal of 4 caravans within the woodland, spaced approximately 10 to 12 metres apart. It also demonstrates space for 4 car parking spaces, including turning area. There is an existing bund adjacent to the A16 to the south east of the site. That's proposed to be retained as part of this application. As part of the applicant's supporting statement, they've provided an example of the style of static caravan, which is shown here. That's the sort of appearance and elevations that they're proposing as part of the 4 proposed caravans on the site. From the existing site photos, you can see it's currently used in conjunction with the existing business, mainly for storage, pallets, material in relation to the firewood business adjacent. Within the officer report, there is a discussion around the character, amenity, parking and highways impacts. And the case officer concludes that the proposal would not have a detrimental impact in terms of these elements. However, in terms of policy 9, which is the stronger visitor economy policy, which relates to tourism development in the borough, policy 9 sets out 3 tests, one of which is proposals outside settlements are required to demonstrate a functional link with an existing rural attraction or farm enterprise. And within the officer report, you'll see that it's concluded that this particular site isn't a farm business, it isn't an existing rural attraction, and therefore concludes that in principle, the proposal is contrary to policy 9 and 1 in terms of its location in the countryside, and doesn't provide sufficient justification to outweigh this location in the countryside, and therefore it's currently recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms Marwood. As we have no registered speakers, we'll now open this up to the meeting for further deliberation. Would you like to speak? Would you like to come forward? And we've taken the guillotine away. Oh, sorry. Sorry, you're not a registered speaker.
Who'd you register with?
It's with your discretion, Chairman, if you wish the gentleman to speak.
Okay. Okay. You look a reasonable person to me. I'm not here to have conflict. I'd like to.
Can we just take your name, sir?
We're not the enemy. We're here to help. Would you like to speak? You have 5 minutes, and I think you ring the bell with 30 seconds to go, and then again when the 5 minutes is up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing me to present our response to your report. All we are asking for is parity of decision making, particularly in the determination of applicants using the same council policies by the same officers. The site has had 2 successful applications, B/20/0393 and B/21/0317. Both of these were for industrial purposes and have no conditions nor requests for transport assessment. This application is for 4 lodges, which entails only private vehicles, yet has to have transport assessment and has received objections on traffic grounds, admittedly not from Lincolnshire County Council, and your officers have not said that it needs, there are any problems with the transport. This area can be used for parking lorries or anything else within the industrial use, or be clear felled. So this application is definitely betterment for what you have seen the photographs of there. On your supplementary agenda, you should have the 4 approved applications approved recently in the immediate area for exactly the same purpose. The most local at Lewis Farm, Wigtoft, was approved by the same officer. Both are in agricultural use. both for a small number of lodges, this for 4 and Lewis Farm for 3. Neither have any on-site tourist attractions, and the other 2 applications that we forwarded on did not either. One had a pond that could be used for fishing, and one had 2 alpacas that residents could stroke. I know the Lewis Farm one very well because I was the agent for that one as well. This site is close to Frampton Nature Reserve, one of the largest tourist attractions in the area, and accessible from the site by cycle without using any major roads. There is a farm shop at Sutterton within cycling distance, the thatched cottage restaurant and the King's Head at Curtin, all within easy reach. This is a further chance to support these rural businesses in a sustainable way. There was an objection from the parish council pointing out that there were sites in the area. Competition should not come into planning. It didn't in any of the other cases. I would ask you to support this application to help your rural tourism agenda. I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, well, committee members can ask questions specifically to what this gentleman has put forward. Anybody would like to speak? Oh, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can turn to face Mr. Crust. You referred to supplementary information, I think, a moment ago. I'm just rapidly looking this up to see if we have received that supplementary information. I don't know whether the planning officer can, or Democratic Services can say, have we received that information that Mr. Crust is referring to?
You want to answer, Mark?
Through yourself, Mr. Chairman, there's no dedicated supplementary for this particular item. There are a number of applications that are referenced at paragraph 7.10 on page 19 of the report, which were cited within the applicant's supporting statement. So those have been considered by the officer when putting forward the report that's before you today.
May I just come back and supplement my question then? Is that what you were referring to? What is on 7.10 on page 19 of these papers?
The applications are, but the other information, when we got the request to speak, it said that we could put in further information which would be shown to the committee as long as it was sent 2 days before the meeting. And that was what was done. It expanded on those applications which were so similar in a similar area, and it gave a map with the radius on it.
Could you inform us who you actually addressed this information to?
It would be Democratic Services. It was the same time that I requested to speak on this item and the last item.
You want to speak, Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To help move the issue on clearly, there seems to be a breakdown somewhere. Democratic Services are indicating they've not received anything. So in real terms, we can only judge the application based on what you've heard from the speaker today and the information that we've got as part of the report and as part of the consideration. Clearly, the point that is being made by the speaker is that there are similarities between this site and other sites. And to a degree that has been covered off within the officer report already. And as members will remember from the training, as we've said before, each case must be considered on its own merits based on the application that's presented to us as an application. Largely, that information should come up front prior to getting to a committee, so we shouldn't be expecting loads of addendums, etc., with additional information at the 11th hour. And it is, consistency of approach, of decision making, of application, of policy that is the key consideration. As I say, the determination on one site does not automatically conclude that you should reach the same conclusion on another site, because the applications may be similar but different. The sites may have individual circumstances. So it's open for members today to continue to debate. I don't think there's anything that I've heard from the speaker or the issue in terms of democratic services not receiving the information that would preclude us from making a decision, but happy to take guidance from our legal advisor if she feels otherwise.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't disagree with what Mr Gildersleeves has said. Mr Crust, with the Chairman's discretion, if you wanted to take a couple of moments to elaborate on the information that you thought members had, that's obviously within the Chairman's discretion, but obviously, you know, you are meant to have 5 minutes to speak. So obviously we'd sort of appreciate if you could summarise succinctly, but yes, if you felt you wanted to make that point and the Chairman allowed it, then that could be permissible.
Would you like to take that offer up?
I would, please, because I do have the copies of what was emailed through. Yes, it was application B210460, Sykemout Drove Curtain. The officer said, whilst this was finely balanced, the proposal is considered to provide a level of local economic benefits, some limited community benefits, and subject to conditions will provide significant ecological enhancements to the site. It is therefore considered that the proposal, when assessed on the whole, does comply with the requirements of the second requirement of policy 1D. In relation to policy 9, the need for a functional link, the officer stated that this is a subjective issue which requires further discussion to establish the acceptability of principle of development. They considered that policy 9 does not require that the rural attractions need to be on the application site. Application at Timber Home, North 40-foot bank. The land is immediately adjacent to a residential dwelling, which is under the applicant's ownership. The dwelling will also be tied to the operations of the site. The proposal is to create a small holding niche tourism facility, which will sit comfortably with a host property. The scale of the site and operation is likely to be self-limiting in order to maintain the peaceful niche nature of the proposal. All three requirements of policy 9 have been satisfied, in addition to policy 1 being satisfied, yet it was a residential property and not an agricultural property or anything else. Another one here, the provision of 6 holiday lodges are small scale in nature. They will not conflict with the surrounding uses and are common of lodges that can be found in such rural settings. And there is an existing holiday let at Wibberton House. And furthermore, whilst it is no direct link, the site is in proximity to the RSPB reserves at Frampton and Freeston Shore. It has been demonstrated the proposal complies with the requirements outlined in policies 1 and 9 of the South East Lincolnshire Plan. And Lewis Farm, the whole of Lewis Farm is under the ownership of the applicant. The site has a mixed usage, including agriculture, arboriculture, residential dwellings, and several outbuildings, including the building to house 2 biomass boilers. It is considered that the proposal will not be a detriment to the character of the area due to the location of the pods being at the back of the site. And that is it. It is consistency which we're looking for. We fit exactly as those other 4 applications which were approved under delegated powers do.
Yeah. Councillor Pierpoint.
Thank you for that report and comments. As the officer said, we're looking at everyone individually. This is an individual case and we're not looking at comparing with anything else at all. We're only working on what we've got to work in front of us. As far as I'm concerned, you're bringing different cases and different projects to this meeting, which is not relevant. Thank you.
No, so what if I'm...
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
It's not a, I'm sorry, it's not a to and fro session. It's, no, I appreciate it and I understand. So do we move? Would you like to come in?
Yeah, just to hopefully before we move into opening the debate, clearly it is one of those that is a matter for discussion amongst the committee in terms of the key driver on this is whether or not it complies with policy 1 and policy 9. The report sets out before you how this matter is balanced from an officer perspective based on the information that we have to hand, and based on what is before us, and the weight that members give to the arguments on both sides of that fence is entirely up to you to debate. And if we can assist with any questions or queries, then more than happy to do so.
Councillor Rylett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like the application very much. You can see that the applicant is trying to expand their business from a different angle. We are desperate for more accommodation around Boston to promote tourism. There's great opportunity for that in the area, and we do need more accommodation. My concerns are policy 1 and policy 9 and the noise and pollution in the area. And that's my only concern. Thank you.
Yeah. Any? Oh, Councillor Bedford.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. First, I must declare that I actually know Mr. Crust as is Chairman of Lindsay Marsh Drainage Board, but being as he wasn't on the list to start with, I didn't say so. But it doesn't affect my judgment on it. I went and had a look at this site and drove all around the area last Tuesday. I know the area anyway, but I went for my own thoughts on this. We talk about whether or not it fits policies or whether it doesn't. If you look at the list of what is around that area, yes, it's alongside the A16, but it's also adjacent to a good pathwork of the old-fashioned footpaths. One of them leads to Dennis's Woodland Farm Eco Project, which of course is of national importance. People come from all over the country to visit the Dennis project down there, and the hundreds of acres that they have set with woodlands and so on and so forth. Yes, it's not far from the RSPB. It's not far from the seals at Fosdyke. You can walk down or bike down there, and of course Curtin Marsh. There is amenities there, or within a mile. You've got the Curtin Garden Centre, which has an excellent restaurant, the Thatch in Sutterton, the Bull in Curtin, the Rendezvous Cafe at Fosdyke, the Ship Inn at Fosdyke when it reopens. It's just been at this moment in time refurbished. I support this application and will be happy to move it. I think it needs the conditions that the EA are requesting on page 17, condition 1, condition 2, that the Environment Agency are asking for. That's common sense. That makes it far more adaptable, far more safer, the fact that they're onto a solid base and they're anchored, if need be. But I would also think there should be a condition for a register of who stays there, so that it's there for inspection either by Alderkirk Parish Council or by Boston Borough Council, so that it doesn't become what we know can happen. That would protect this council and also the fears of Alderkirk Parish Council. There are sites like this. We've got one now in Scrain End at Freeston, which we debated here. It came to committee twice and it was passed, and yes, it's okay now. But, you know, we do need things like this within the area. We are here, or I'm certainly here, to promote Boston and its area, and providing we can make it fit within our planning laws and guidelines, then this should be allowed, and I'm quite happy to move it if those conditions are added. Thank you.
Okay. Could I just ask you to move back into the public gallery, please? Okay, so we're moving on now to proposals?
No, Chairman.
Or is there anybody else wanting to speak? Councillor Dorian.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to make a couple of points. First of all, I'd like to declare an interest in that I've met Mr. Crust a couple of times, I think, again, through my friendship with ex-councillor Brian Rush. I'm a bit concerned that he's obviously the mishap over the public speaking time. I'm also concerned that he held himself out as the agent, Mr. Chair, and he's not listed as the agent on the paperwork. If he had been, I would have notified the committee at the start that I wanted to declare that interest. So I'm not sure how that's been allowed to happen either. Also concerned at the way Mr. Crust spoke about the comparison with other applications. Now, I've read the reports, I'm sure all my colleagues have, and it was difficult to follow what he said because he was naming sites, whereas we were working from the numbers that the officers have put, you know, such as B23, oh sorry, what's this one? B210460. So it was difficult for me to follow that. So I've got to go with the information that's in the report. To address a couple of points that Councillor Bedford made, you know, you made a lot of points here about the woods at Dennis Estate, Councillor Bedford, but I don't know that they're backed up by any data. You say people come from all over the country to visit those woods. Well, I don't know that. You know, I'm just having to take your word for it. And I don't know what data you're relying on to say that. So I feel that I've got to go with what's in the report. And what the report says is there is no functional link with any tourist attraction. And that's quite clear. We're all freshly trained, so we have to be I feel we have to be guided by our officers in what they say, because they've got no skin in the game, as it were. They're writing this report based on our local development plan, which is what we have adopted as a council. And lastly, and I would like some legal guidance on this, because and perhaps Councillor Bedford was quite within his rights to do a site visit, but I thought if a site visit was done, we had to go as a committee and not take ourselves off on a ride around. Happy to be corrected on that, but it would be useful to know for the future when applications come before us what is and isn't permitted. But I am minded, I have to say, and I accept Councillor Rylett's point that there is a dearth of accommodation in the area, and the local Premier Inns are always full. But the accommodation, the need for it here hasn't been proved in my mind. So I'm minded to go with the officer recommendation, Mr. Chair, and to refuse this application.
Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through yourself, just in response to a couple of Councillor Dorian's points, clearly there has been an issue in terms of the receipt of the information by Democratic Services. As I say, we'll pick that up after today, but it shouldn't preclude members from making a decision. And it is, it's not uncommon for agents to ask other agents or people to represent them. So that is always part of the challenge. We can't stop that, unfortunately. If somebody's registered, they've registered, and we have to take it as for what it is. In terms of the site visit point, as you'll remember from the training, you know, we can't stop members going out and doing their own due diligence and site visits and riding around the area. You know, we all know the patch. Most of us live in the borough of some description. You know, we don't encourage site visits because officers do that work for us in effect. And on behalf of the committee, you should have everything before you to enable you to make an informed decision. As I say, it does, you know, we don't encourage members to go out on site, but if you happen to, then that's absolutely fine, provided you are coming to the meeting with an open mind, which it sounds like Councillor Bedford was coming to that meeting with an open mind. So from that point of view, there's nothing more to add. If I may, with your discretion, Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, clearly, as we've said in the training, there is a balance of issues here, and this is one where the applicant has put forward their justification for the tourism accommodation in this location, and utilising some of the examples that were cited by Mr. Crust. They were for different products in different locations, very niche tourism, high quality, you know, trying to create differing opportunities in differing locations. They are all fundamentally different from each application that, and even the one that we've got before us now, which is for 4 static caravans. Ultimately, as you'll see from the report, there are concerns with this application based on the way it has been presented and the information that's before us, you know, in terms of the details that accompany the application. There may be other factors that, as Councillor Bedford has alluded to, may have been able to be brought to bear within the supporting statements and information within the application that were maybe not necessarily teased out within this first application that we've got before us, and applying a very similar application that we had at Scrain End. That went away because the committee weren't convinced first time round. It went away as a refusal. It came back with a revised package of information and was subsequently approved because we had a more robust case. And when I talk about that robust case on this, one of the points that has been missed is there are 2 reasons for refusal that are recommended as set out in the report. One is the fundamental reason, which is around the policy 1 and policy 9, which a lot of the discussion so far is focused on. But the second point is around flood risk on this one. And that as it stands at the moment, we do not consider that sufficient information has been presented to pass the sequential test element of this. And there is a difference, as I say, between doing a sequential test and identifying it that it fails and then balancing that out with other issues, as opposed to not doing a sequential test in the first place. So again, when I come back to the comprehensiveness and robustness of an application, as I say, where we stand at the minute as the local planning authority, we are just not yet convinced that all of the required checks and balances in effect have been sufficiently presented to overcome our concerns. So I'm not sitting here today and saying the applicant can't get there at some point in the future, but in terms of the application that we've had and we've assessed on your behalf, we don't believe it is at that stage yet, and hence the recommendation before us. But ultimately, it is one for members to determine, and we will take your steer. I've heard some very cogent points to both for and against, but it's up for members to debate, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Pierpoint.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having listened to all the comments around the table and also from our speaker, taking into consideration everything I've heard, I can't support this application. I can only work on the information given, and I will support what Councillor Dorian says, that, you know, I cannot support this application at this stage. Thank you.
Okay. Have we anybody else wanting to speak? Well, sorry. Jyoti.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually going through the points Algerkirk Parish Council and Environmental Agency was making, and I couldn't support this application.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, reading policy 1 and policy 9, well, I don't feel in particular with regards to a holiday situation that necessarily policy 1 is applicable, but policy 9, because we're talking about holiday accommodation and promoting a stronger visitor economy. And as I read through policy 9, it goes on to talk about established visitor attraction. And to be honest, I would not holiday anywhere near Springfield, thank you, you know, with a shopping village. You know, we've got to allow for diversity of choice. I came in expecting that, oh, why in the world would anyone want to have a holiday in this location? If anyone doesn't know where the site is, I must say, well, what have you been doing all the time you've been in Boston Borough? Because you surely most people drive down the A16, and we know exactly where that bridge is. So you don't have to take yourself on a site visit. You can even look at an ordnance survey or Google Maps. I find this a difficult one. I'm still sort of hung on this one.
Well, Councillor Austin, can we leave you to deliberate?
I am speaking, thank you,
Yes,
Chairman.
well,
I
can
will
you please
continue
tell us,
speaking.
can you please, and not talk me down, can you please?
Sorry, I'm
get-
talking
get-
to the.
Can you please get to the point?
The point is that I don't feel this conflict. I'm looking at policy 9, Chairman, and I have to look at it to be able to quote from it. I don't feel that this conflicts with neighbouring uses or is necessarily out of character with the locality. I think we've got to have stronger reasons for refusal than necessarily we've got here. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you very much. Councillor Broughton.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with what Councillor Rylett said, that we need more tourism to Boston, and also looking at the actual caravans presented, I think they look very, very attractive. My concern is what Alderkirk Parish Council have said, that the roads leading to the site are narrow, unlit, lack pavements and in poor conditions. Now, these caravans are down to be year round. My concern is what's going to happen in December, January and February if we get bad weather. So unfortunately, at the present time, I will be opposing the application.
Thank you, Councillor Broughton. That's it, we're done. Okay.
But you want to check.
Councillor Rylett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to second the proposal from Councillor Bedford to grant.
So do we do which do we take, the second one first? So we take a vote then on passing this.
Chairman, sorry, in terms of the proposal to approve that's just been seconded by Councillor Ryland, can we just confirm exactly what the proposal is in terms of, I know that Councillor Bedford put forward a number of conditions, but obviously we just need to check in with Mike about actually whether any officers would recommend additional conditions just to obviously mitigate the site, etc. And obviously they need to just be tabled as the official proposal. So just before we take that vote, we just need to go to officers.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Chairman, through yourself. So just recapping, Councillor Bedford, in terms of some of the points that you suggested, that in moving to approve the application, contrary to officer recommendation, you feel that there are benefits from the proposal arising from more accommodation and diversification of the tourism market for the borough, that there are sufficient access to public footpaths and other nearby facilities. In particular, some examples were the Dennis Farm woodland and the ship, as well as the RSPB, and that you would recommend that the council imposes a condition in relation to a register for the occupants of that development. I would also, if I may, as you know, as usual practice, seek your agreement to delegate to officers the final suite of conditions that are required to be imposed. Clearly, this is going contrary to officer recommendation, so we need to make sure that we have sufficient controls, particularly in relation to the holiday use, and make sure that those are consistent with other sites and our standard practices. So if you're comfortable with that, Councillor Bedford.
You're very happy with that. Obviously, it is because of the holiday thing that I'm supporting it, and the fact that no, there isn't hard footpaths down any country lane, not to my knowledge anyway. But when you ride down there, the road surface actually isn't bad. And when you look down from that flyover, you cannot see off the A16. You look down from that flyover into it, and it really is a haven. but the 4 caravans would fit in perfectly in my mind. Thank you.
If I may just come back then, Mr. Chairman, I'm satisfied that the reasons that have been put forward by Councillor Bedford wouldn't expose the council to any undue risk. It is a matter of planning judgment. So subject to that resolution being passed with the delegation to officers to impose the conditions, I'd be happy to move forward.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to second the proposals. Thank you.
Right. So we're asking for a show of hands in support of that Councillor Bedford's proposal with the qualifications put forward by officers. Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? No. Okay. So now we move to the refute proposal and Councillor Dorian's proposal to refuse.
Yes,
In
Chairman.
line with the officer's recommendation.
Yeah, that was seconded by Councillor Pierpoint, Chairman. Thank you.
All those in favour? Against? I'm sorry, but the application is refused. Our next item today is planning application B/23/0052 on page 27 of the agenda, and Mrs. Emma Turvey will present this report.
Thank you, Chairman. As you can see, this is a change of use application to change the use of Unit 4 Wharf Park from B2 use, which is general industry, to an auction house, which is sui generis. Slide 1 shows the location of the site in the red circle. Watery Lane is to the north of the site, and there are residential dwellings to the west of the site. Slide 2 shows the site layout with the allocated parking area in purple. This parking area has been made available to the public on auction day and can hold 15 cars and is accessed via Watery Lane. The next slide is looking north on Sea Lane and shows the site on the right and the neighbours' driveways on the left. The next slide shows Unit 3, which is a vehicle repair business. The next slide shows the site from Watery Lane looking at the car parking entrance. The next slide is again looking north on Sea Lane, but this time it's on auction day. And you can see the cones which have been put out by the applicant to stop parking on the residential side. The next slide shows the site on the left looking south on Sea Lane. And again, you can see the cones that have been put out and are put out every auction day by the applicant to stop the cars blocking the driveways. The next slide shows the piece of land adjacent to number 34. Sea Lane, which has also been blocked off by the applicants to stop the cars parking on it and to keep the pathway clear. The next slide shows the area made available for parking for the public, and this is actually on auction day as well. The main issues relates to the noise coming from the sites on auction day, highway safety issues and hours of opening. Environmental Health have no objections and have stated that the use of Unit 4 should not be any more intrusive than its previous industrial uses and have requested a condition restricting the hours of opening. Links County Council Highways have recommended approval subject to the conditions which I've added in my report.
Butterwick Parish Council have concerns regarding the parking around the site and have requested that conditions are added which restricts parking and the hours of operation. It's also important to note the history of Unit 4, which has previously been a fiberglass business and a car and commercial repair business before that. Officers consider that the proposal is acceptable and therefore recommend for approval, subject to conditions set out in the published report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms Turvey. We do have a speaker on this item. Mr Channing, would you care to come forward, please? I don't know if I have to repeat this. You have 5 minutes and the bells will go appropriately.
Thank you for this opportunity. I've lived in Butterwick for 7 years. When we first moved in, the taxi driver was there. Hardly any traffic involving that business. When the fiberglass company took over, we had some noise issues, which was resolved quite quickly. Again, traffic issues was kept to very, very minimum. When Mr. Smith took over, yes, I have no objection to any business being there. I think the way it's gone forward, at the beginning, there was a lot of cars being parked along the business. I live directly opposite the auction at number 36 C Lane. So my house is directly opposite the big doors. There was a lot of parking all over C Lane, to be honest, grass verges. And thank you to Mr. Smith, he did put the cones out to prevent people blocking our driveways. We were advised by Highways to put 2 signs on our driveway asking people not to block our driveway so we can gain access quite easily in and out of our driveway. He has blocked people from parking on the grass verge, which we are grateful for. I think my main concerns now is it has been noted on auction day, when he has his auction outside, unfortunately we can't hear him having the auction in our lounge, to be honest, when he's selling things. I know it's only 1 day a week. I work quite a lot of hours and sometimes it's nice to have a peaceful, relaxing day indoors. When he's inside the auction, we don't really hear him, but when he's outside, we do hear it all. And unfortunately, when you have a lot of people at the auction, they do spill onto the road, standing on the road with the auction, which I do not deem safe, personally. It's quite a big site, this industrial place. I'm sure the owner of the site has other units on the inside of this industrial. I don't see why it can't be compromised, because not all the people that come to this auction use the car park. Is there any way that this auction can be moved to the inside of the industrial area so it's enclosed? The people that come to the auction are kept safe, away from the roadside. As you see on the slide, some of the vans are half parked on the pavement, half on the road. We have tractors with trailers coming down that road. We have Arctics coming down that road, obviously restricting the vans and that parking there. I have no qualms with Mr. David, to be perfectly honest. It's just, I think it's just the way it's gone forward with the amount of people attending it, some of them on the road, the noise levels when I can hear the auction, but I don't really like to hear it. And the way the cars are just parked all over the village, with some people I perceive in Upsall Road, which is next to C Lane, can't get to their own parking spaces. I perceive, if possible, if it can be helped, that he'd be moved, if he can move inside the actual industrial area. That way, helping everybody else, some sort of compromise. We're absolutely mostly grateful. My second thing, I perceive, if I'm wrong, I do apologise, under the existing planning rules he's under, he's not to open on a Sunday. On Sunday the 28th at 11:30, I did notice, I heard some noise, and I did notice Mr. Smith outside with his doors open to the units, unloading a van. I thought that was a breach of the planning.
And as far as I can remember, also bank holidays he should be opening, the current ones. And that was a bank holiday Monday the 29th. He was there again. There was 2 vans this time, unloading. No disrespect, if he can breach the ones he's under conditioning now, what's to stop him breaching in the future?
30 seconds left, sir.
And my final one is, at the moment, he's only doing 1 auction a week. What's the prevention of further auctions happening throughout the week in future, creating even more traffic coming into the village, unless it's controlled into a confined area, please? Thank you for listening, and hopefully some sort of reasonable solution will come out of this.
Thank you, Mr. Channing. Have we any committee members with questions? Councillor Pierpoint.
Can I ask you, how long does the auction go on for in this 1 day week auction? How long, what's the length of time?
I don't think there's a time limit to the actual auction personally. I'd imagine it would go on for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours.
Does it start at a certain time and finish at a certain time?
I perceive he opens about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I think there's a finishing time at 4 o'clock.
I'm asking about the auctions that's outside. What time does the auction start? What time does the auction?
I've only noticed that when he's outside, he may be there for an hour, but they may move inside.
So you're talking about an hour's worth of disturbance and noise on the outside where there's an outside auction. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Dorian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't actually have a specific question. I just wanted to commend the speaker on how respectful he was.
Councillor Dorian, it's questions.
All
If
right.
you've got comments, you can make those during the debate, but
I
at the
will
minute
do.
it's just questions of clarification.
All
of
right,
what the
thank you
speaker
very much.
said.
Yeah,
No
that's
worries.
fine. I'll make a comment later. Thank you.
Councillor Broughton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to ask Mr. Channing, on these 2 dates, Sunday the 28th and the bank holiday Monday, how long was the actual vehicles there for? And was the unloading and loading, or was they just parked there?
I noticed on the Sunday, I only looked at the time I noticed he was parked there at 11:30, and I did see Mr. Smith unload the vehicle himself. To be honest, I mean, I've heard in the past, we've been told by planning, they can open up on a Sunday because they deem they might be doing paperwork. But to me, unloading a van is not doing paperwork. That to me is business, to be honest. And the Monday, I was informed by my wife that the hours that she noted he was there was he left at 1:30. I'm not too sure how long he's actually there, but there's 2 vehicles there unloading. I don't make to be honest, record of how long people sit there and all that. I mean, I just noticed, and you hear a noise disturbance. I don't really record how long they're there for. I do apologise for this.
Anybody, any more discussion or questions? Sorry. No. Oh. Can I ask you to take your place back in the public gallery?
Yeah. Thanks ever so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Yeah.
He's not on the list.
Okay. And now we have Mr. Smith. Can you come forward, please? The same rules apply to yourself as have previously been enforced. Thank you.
If I can give my throat, because I've got a sore throat. If I can start by addressing some of the points raised by the objector. The auction on a Wednesday, we open at 8:30 for viewing. The auction starts at 10 a.m. We immediately start with all outdoor goods. Those are bicycles, lawnmowers, patio furniture, those kind of things. Those items are placed on land owned by me, not on the public highway. We auction them, I use my voice. So they live opposite, they've got the main road, plus approximately 15 yards of land and a high edge, double glazing, and he says he can hear my voice. He must have good hearing. I use my voice, I don't use the tannoy because I did buy a tannoy. I tried it and realised it was too loud, so I no longer use that. We then move indoors, and the auction is conducted indoors until we cease. That normally between 2:30 and 3:30, depending on how many lots we have. People do not park, as your photographs clearly show, because I put cones out. I put metal stakes in the grass to stop people parking on there. The car park is opened at 8 o'clock on auction day only. And people are using that car park. Regarding Upsall Road and his comments about parking there, Upsall Road has no parking restrictions in that. I cannot be held responsible for where people park. They are free to park anywhere because there's no yellow lines. I do my utmost to aid the locality by putting cones down. That is to aid the farm traffic predominantly coming through the day. We have had issues with my neighbour. One in particular when his wife came storming out when an 80-year-old man was trying to load a compressor onto his car and the generator and decided to F and blind at him, causing him to ring me to apologise for him parking legally. Regarding the bank holiday, yes, 2 vehicles did attend. One was mine. I have a white van and it's clearly seen in one of the pictures that the planning officer did. The other vehicle was a Luton van. And yes, he did drop off some stuff. He dropped off some tables that I use to put items on that people can see. The reason he came on the bank holiday Monday is because he works himself and he was doing me a favour and dropping them off. I couldn't pick them up in my van because I couldn't lift them because I've got damage to my hands. I can't straighten my hand, I can't hold things. Regarding the Sunday hours, that was me on my own. The only time I can carry out any form of repairs to the building is when it's not in use. And initially, because I took up the building from a fiberglass company, as you can imagine, there was a lot of fiberglass lying about, which I didn't want left. So I swept it all up. I painted the building inside. We've put a kitchen inside, which environmental are aware of and dealing with. So there was a lot of initial work going on, but could only be done at a weekend. That has now ceased. If I go on a weekend, it's because I want peace and quiet to do my paperwork. And that's why I go there on a weekend if I go on a Sunday at all. But I try to avoid Sundays because my other half does not get very happy. We have deliveries Monday to Tuesday. We have collections Thursday, Friday, and occasional deliveries on a Friday. The reason that I've come to Butterwick and the gentleman suggested, could we move in somewhere else? If I move somewhere into the car park area, you lose the car park. That's the choice. I decided from health and safety and for the neighbours, it was better to have the car park. Safer. Cars are all in one location. They don't have to walk around because of the side door that they come through. And the auction outside lasts no more than an hour and a half maximum. If I can be of any further assistance regarding any of those, please feel free to ask.
Councillor Pierpoint.
Our first speaker, one of your neighbours, mentioned that you are trading on bank holidays on Sundays, which he says is breach of law or the licence or whatever it is. Are you trading on bank holidays and Sundays?
No. I do attend the premises myself to carry out remedial work or to do paperwork. I am not trading. If I was to trade, even if I was legally allowed to, I can trust me, I would be hung, drawn and quartered by a certain female.
The other question I want to ask
She wants me to have my bank holidays and weekends off to go places.
Right, okay.
I work 5 days a week. I'm 62 years of age. I don't want to be working any longer.
Thank you. The other question I want to ask you is, what have you done to minimise any noise, pollution or anything to do with upsetting neighbours who live across the road for you, whether it's the gentleman there or anybody else in there? What have you done to minimise that?
We have no pollution issues.
Fair enough.
Other than motor vehicle exhaust fumes, which I can't do anything about that. To minimise noise, I spoke to the owners of the land and agreed with them to open up the gates to allow car parking. So we have no motor vehicle noise.
How many visitors do you get on your auction days and who visit your premises?
This will be an estimate because it varies every week, but we normally have around, first thing, around 50 people at 10 a.m. The bike buyers and the outdoor buyers tend to leave after they've bought, because they're not interested in the indoor stuff. So then it would knock down gradually throughout the day. And we normally end, when we finish the auction, there's probably about a dozen people.
And are those 50 people parking in your car park or strewn all across the road?
The planning officer stated that there was car parking for 15. We've actually had 30 cars in there. I counted them the other week. There was 30 vehicles. I must admit, they couldn't all get out at one, and that people had to move about to let others out. But we do get up to 30 vehicles in there, and others do park legally where they're allowed to do so. There's no real noise pollution other than myself auctioneering for maximum of an hour and a half outside. Once it's we go inside, my rostrum is positioned at such a distance that you won't hear my voice outside anyway. I have neighbours who live next door to the people, and they've said they can't hear me. They can't hear me even when they're sat in the garden. So,
thank you.
I must, if it is refused, then obviously I will have to move. I do employ 75% of my staff live in Butterwick.
Okay.
So I'm a local employer.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Is there any legal restriction on you opening your firm at all on any of the days at the moment?
At this moment, there is no legal restriction. This is one of the conditions I believe that the planning officer is asking for, and that is a condition that I am not objecting to.
Mr. Gildersleeve, do you want to?
Mr. Chairman, I'll pick up that point once we've finished questions of the speaker, if you don't mind.
Can we leave that point then and talk about it later? Councillor Broughton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question, because Councillor Pierpoint's already covered some of the other questions. If these restrictions come into place with not being able to trade on bank holiday Mondays, when are you looking at getting your deliveries, which you've just stated you normally get on a Monday and a Tuesday? What other days will you be getting them delivered, and will we be having to get extra people in, and also the car parking?
Read the deliveries on a bank holiday Monday. This week has just gone. We've had no deliveries. I don't. If it's a bank holiday, at the moment we don't have deliveries because I don't want to work on a bank holiday. They then all come on a Tuesday, which obviously creates problems for me because Monday, Tuesday is better because I can spread it out. I've got to photograph and lot every item that comes in and check every item to make sure there's no damage, no broken glass, no sharps in there, all sorts of things, because these items, the majority of my stuff comes from house clearances. So it makes my work harder, but I'm quite happy to not work on a bank holiday on Monday, and more importantly, so is my other half.
Okay,
and she's the one I dictate to.
Any further discussion? Okay. Can you take your place?
Yeah, can I just say, sir, thank you to the help from the planning department, because they've been a great help in this.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Yeah, planning is not the enemy. Can you please take your seat? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you open it up to debate, hopefully I can add a bit of colour to what we've got here and hopefully address some of the points that have been raised. Clearly, as it stands at the moment, the auction house use is operating on an unauthorised basis, so it does not have planning permission to be operating from that premises. So it is operating outside of any restrictions. You will see that in the report, officers are recommending conditional permission. You will see that environmental health have not raised any objections, and nor have highways. But you will see that condition 2, as we've recommended, seeks to impose some restrictions on the operation of the use itself. So it tries to do that in a couple of different ways. So it restricts the hours between 8 o'clock and 6 o'clock Monday to Saturday. So those are the hours that it can be open, at no times on a Sunday or bank holidays. And in particular, it covers not being open to customers or open for collections or deliveries. So picking up on a couple of examples that have been cited, the condition has been shared with the applicant. They've raised no objections to it, and that would enable them to operate within 8 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night, Monday to Saturdays. And then if they wanted to do repairs to the building, do some paperwork, those sorts of things, they could go into the building and do that without being in breach of that condition, provided there are no customers on site and provided they're not taking formal collections or deliveries outside of those times. And so we feel that is an appropriate response to balance up the needs of the business, but also the general amenity issues that have been raised today. To hopefully maybe assist as well, picking up on something that the speaker said in terms of that they don't use an amplifier or a tannoy or something like that for when they're doing outside. That is something that we could add an additional condition to that effect if members felt that was reasonable and necessary. And equally, I would also suggest to members that we may look at imposing an additional condition to require the parking area to be open and available for use at all times when the premises is open, in line with condition 2. Again, so in a slight change from the report, if members were minded to go in line with the officer recommendation, I would strongly encourage you to consider the imposition of those 2 additional conditions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I don't think he can't speak again. Sorry, you can't speak. No.
Just have a quick word.
Councillor Pierpoint.
My concern obviously is to do with the parking, and you've just raised that point, because I'm concerned about people living in the area with cars strewn all over the place, and 50 cars down somebody's street, down their road is quite horrific in my view, especially if you're trying to live. I appreciate the gentleman's running a business and I understand his situation. I do think we need to have these conditions in about the car parking and the other things that you raised as well. Thank you.
Okay, I open up for discussion. Councillor Austin.
Thank you. Very early in the discussion, I think, but I would be prepared to move that we accept this with the conditions that have been put forward, which are regarding the tray, the hours and the car park. That seems to be one of the crucial conditions. But as regards doing any sort of maintenance, well, I mean, people are maintaining their own houses, aren't they? So what's the difference between painting an auction house and painting your own house? I see no difference there. So, as I said, I would be prepared to look for a seconder, as I say, with those extra conditions. Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak? Councillor Dorian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a couple of things I can say now. I'd like to commend Mr. Channing on how respectful he was in objecting to the application. I thought you conducted yourself very well, and I think some people could learn from the way you did conduct yourself and, you know, not make faces behind your back. Having said all that, and I do feel for you, and I believe Mr. Channing when he says he can hear the auctioneer, you know, there may be a road there, but there aren't tractors going up and down all the time. And I would think if you've got your windows open, it's a nice sunny day, you would hear someone across the road. Having said all that, you've bought a house opposite an industrial area, and we've got to allow industry to flourish and thrive. So I would second Councillor Austin's move of the report. I would agree that the conditions of the not allowing a tannoy or a loudspeaker to be used, and ensure that the car parking is open, the car park's open, and that all parking as far as possible is done on the premises. So I'd be happy to second that proposal from Councillor Austin, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Is all discussion finished? Oh.
Regarding the condition number 2, the car park, the deliveries being restricted to certain hours. I think it is. I think it is very, very normal for some of the deliveries, unexpected deliveries to happen. You know, if there are certain unavoidable causes to happen on a bank holiday or a Sunday, and I don't think that is really necessary, because what would be the point of actually restricting? What are we trying to achieve here? So that's a question really.
Okay, Councillor Pierpoint.
I'd just like to disagree with you on that point there, because I think you can control your deliveries by talking to the companies when they deliver. And I think it's up to the individual companies to organise that within the terms of reference here that we're talking about. You know, if I was running a business, I would make sure that my deliveries come in Monday to Friday, not at the weekends and not on bank holidays. Thank you.
Through yourself, Mr. Chairman, it's a perfectly reasonable question to ask in terms of that point. We feel that this is an appropriate balance that strikes, you know, bearing in mind that it is an industrial site, it's unrestricted at the moment, given that the core use is within that Monday to Saturday period. It's not unreasonable for people to expect a higher standard of residential amenity at a weekend on a Sunday and a bank holiday, when generally noise levels are that a little bit lower. So again, we feel that this is an appropriate balance. Ultimately, if the applicant decides that actually they disagree with that view, they can appeal that condition if they want to, and seek longer hours, or they can come back at a later point in time to seek longer hours. In terms of enforcement, being honest about it, if there is the ad hoc occasion where something happens and there is a delivery at a weekend that is unusual, we're not going to jump down the throat of the applicant in that way. But if it becomes a regular occurrence and they are clearly opening and breaching that condition, that's when they open themselves up to enforcement action. So we feel that the condition that is there is reasonable, necessary, it meets all the required tests, and as Councillor Pierpoint has made, the onus is then on the business operator to flex within what they've currently got. If they step outside of those terms, they potentially put themselves at risk of enforcement action.
Okay, so we have a proposer and we have a seconder. Do we need to summarise the conditions or anything?
Okay.
Oh, sorry, there was the additional conditions.
Yeah, so as I understand it, Mr. Chairman, the recommendation is to approve the application in line with the report and the conditions as listed, but with delegation to officers to impose two additional conditions. One, to require the provision of the parking area be available at all times when the premises is open, in line with condition 2. And a second condition in relation to the prevention of use of amplified equipment or tannoys for the outside auction element of the proposal. So that is the proposal as I understand it.
Okay. All right, can I ask people in favour?
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Don't have to ask anything else then. Okay. I think that has been carried in a, and now we come to our final piece of business for the day, or which is point 3. Our final item of business is planning application B//22/0491 on page 37 of the agenda. And this will be presented by Ms. Lauren Birkwood.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is an application for a proposed 2-storey dwelling for an essential worker at Lincolnshire Firewood and Coal on Roedyke Road in Wibberton. So there you can see the application site outlined in red. The application is situated within the open countryside with some neighbouring properties to the east. And again, the application site outlined in red with the plantation situated to the north. And again, the application outlined in red with the property situated within the centre. So as you can see, again, the dwelling is outlined and access will be taken via an existing access which is used already by a neighbouring property. So the dwelling would be 2 stories in height. It would have 4 bedrooms and it would be constructed in similar materials to properties within the area, including brickwork and tiled roofs. And again, just showing the floor plan, so showing the usual dining, kitchen, lounge areas on ground floor with the bedrooms at first floor. So this photo shows where the dwelling would be sited. So it is within the western agricultural field to the adjacent to the neighbouring properties, showing the access to the site. And again, to the left of this photo is where the dwelling would be situated, with neighbouring properties that are owned by the plantation for essential workers to the right. And again, just showing a photo down Rhodite Road, and again with further properties that are used by essential workers to the left. And again, just showing the openness of the countryside and looking down Rhodite Road. As you can see, there are no pathways. So this is just going through just a little bit of history of the site in terms of, so the application site, as you can see, is to the west. An application was approved in 2008 for a 4-bedroom dwelling. And then again, an application was approved in 2016, again for essential workers for a 4-bedroom dwelling. And again, the plantation is to the north. I have provided a supplementary item just to be included with the report, which just adds the 2016 permission to the list. And this is just showing a little bit of context in terms of where the dwelling is. As you can see, it is within the open countryside, and it, in accordance with the local plan, it is outside of the development boundary. But as you can see to the north, there is the application for the dwellings for Heron Park, and also to the northwest, the development at the quadrant, which we'll go through a little bit more in terms of what's outlined in the report. So again, the development site falls outside the development boundary of Wibberton and therefore is within the open countryside. So in terms of policy 1, which is spatial strategy, identifies that Boston's countryside as an area of development restraint, and that development should be necessary to its location and demonstrate that it meets the sustainable needs of the area. However, outlined in the report, it is considered that any economic, community and environmental benefits that arise from the proposal will be outweighed by harmful effects that would stem from the site's unsustainable location, and therefore does not accord with policy 1. So in terms of the need for the development, the applicant has outlined with the submission that the dwelling is required as the turnover of the depot and the workforce has expanded. However, although the business associated with the dwelling is in a rural location, we do consider that the business does not constitute a farm or agricultural business, which accords with the paragraphs and information outlined in national planning policy documents. Furthermore, as you can see again, there are a range of existing dwellings within the immediate area for sale or rent, which are under 2 miles from the site, that could be utilised. So therefore, as there is no sufficient justification provided for a permanent dwelling on this site, the development is contrary to policy 1. In terms of the impact on the character of the area, which is covered under policy 2 and 3, as you can see, the dwelling is similar in appearance to other properties within the immediate area, including those adjacent to the site. However, as you can see from the sides, it would be situated Sorry, it would be situated within the adjacent western field, which has a defined boundary. It's therefore the dwelling would encroach into the field and countryside, which would affect the character and openness of the area. In terms of flood risk, which is covered under Policy 4, the site is situated within Flood Zone 3 of the Environment Agency maps and in a high risk area of the Council's Strategic Flood Risk Assessment. The applicant did provide a flood risk assessment submitted with the application, but it did not include a successful sequential test to demonstrate sites at lesser risk of flooding are available. And there are other available plots, as you can see within the slides, that are available within the development boundaries at lesser risk of flooding in sustainable locations. Furthermore, the Environment Agency have objected to the development, stating that the mitigation provided in terms of the finished floor levels is inadequate to resist the potential deaths of flooding over the lifetime of the development. And therefore the development is contrary to Policy 4. As outlined and as outlined in the report, there are some issues with regards to the proposal in terms of the proposal does not meet the requirements of Policy 1, Policy 2, 3 or 4, and therefore we are recommending refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Birkwood. We now have another speaker, Councillor Richard Austin.
Mr Crust is speaking first, Chairman.
Oh,
yeah.
When did that happen? Sorry, Councillor Austin, it seems that we're having Mr Crust first.
Oh, right.
Yeah, but I thought he was talking about the first one. So he's lost both of them. That's unusual.
Possibly. Yes.
Okay, all right. Same rules apply, I'm afraid. 5 minutes and then the bell's ringed.
Yes, and the applicant has also registered as well. Is that correct? Right.
Well, he wants
Ladies and gentlemen.
Well, just a minute. Are we saying that you're speaking?
I was speaking for 3 minutes and the applicant was going to speak for 2.
Okay. Fine. Yeah.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing me to speak to the committee today. I'll be pleased to answer any questions you may have at the end. Firstly, I would like to point out 2 omissions in the committee report. In point 3, the planning history, 2 applications have been omitted. B160041, that was the new residential property at Streetway, Wibberton, PE 217AQ, which was actually pointed out by the planning officer. That is owned by Lincolnshire Firewood and Coal, as is Holly Lodge. This property that's been missed off is the other side of Holly Lodge, and they're both owned by the applicant and was approved by this committee following an officer report recommending approval due to the need for an essential worker. Since the turnover of the firewood company has quadrupled, since that approval, the turnover of the firewood company has quadrupled, with much more drying of logs done in a 24-hour, 7 days a week cycle. The company has also adopted a strict no lone working with the kilns and forklifts for employees' safety's sake. The committee approval accepted the need on those grounds. The second application, and this is far more, I think, omitted, is B/22/0196 for the erection of a general purpose shed to be used for storage and workshop at Rodike Road, Wibberton, PE 217AQ, the same postcode as this application. And it's some 20 metres to the rear. So this house will not be seen in open countryside because there is a large shed which is built. The dimensions of this shed are 30 metres long, 18 metres wide and 9 metres high, the same height as this building just behind it. This shields the views of the application site completely from the open countryside and was granted under delegated powers with no landscaping conditions. The new house will blend in with Holly Lodge and uses the same access. It should be taken into account that no objections have been received from the parish council and the local ward member, Councillor Richard Austin, at point 66, supports the applications on the grounds of environmental sustainability and in support of the expansion of a local business. At 7.5, the report says no sequential or exceptions test was provided. The sequential test is in the flood risk assessment and was taken over a 5-kilometre diameter, but it is almost possible to comply with an exception test in Boston Borough due to the fact that there are no high ground.
Your 3 minutes are up, Mr. Crust. Sorry,
I'll have another minute. This is a 2-storey house. The exceptions test is the same as that accepted by the committee for the approval of B160041, where the planning officer explained the exception test was proven by the requirements of the business and isolated it was not isolated because it was in a group of properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to come forward?
You have 1 minute, 40 seconds remaining, sir. Thank you.
It's absolutely essential that we have people to monitor the kilns at night. We had a severe fire in 2017. If it wasn't for a member of staff attending the site to monitor the kilns, we'd have lost the entire yard. As it happened, we only lost 20% of it due to his quick actions. The staff coming to the yard, you know, it's a 10-minute job to regulate the kilns, but if you're living 2 miles away, you've got to get in your car, drive to the yard. It's going to take staff twice as long to drive to the yard than it is to actually do the job in hand, which is why I provide housing for them on the back door of the yard so they can literally walk straight to the yard. We had a tragic accident 3 years ago in which a member of staff died at our Norfolk site due to lone working. So now we don't allow any lone working at all. I know I live on the edge of the site. You know, members of staff come. I take my share of the role of regulating the kilns. Sometimes members of staff have knocked on my door because I've nodded off on the sofa. That's absolutely fine if you're living on the site. But if you've got a member of staff who's 2 miles up the road who's nodded off, you've now got a member of staff there on his own. So what does he do? Does he do the job on his own? Because they probably will do, even though they're instructed not to do. You know, I really need staff on site.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak. Links Firewood is a substantial, thriving and expanding business, but your decision today will have a big effect on whether this happy state of affairs continues. There have been no objections, as been mentioned, and I've brought this application to the committee on grounds of environmental sustainability and expansion of a local business. Clearly, the Lincolnshire Firewood Company has an important role to play in the reduction of Boston Borough's carbon footprint. We need to encourage it to continue to prosper. Let us first consider 3 material considerations on which to build your case for approval. The 3 are health and safety, viability, and thirdly, economic considerations. Health and safety. And why a manager needs to live on site to ensure the future viability of the expansion of the business.
The routine job of a manager is to engage on keeping there's 10 kilns that work there, 10, and they've got to be kept operating safely and at full capacity. It's a very responsible and demanding job, and it's not a seasonal job, although the level of demand varies during the year. You've heard that at 5:30 one morning in 2017, there was a major fire at this site and 20% of it was destroyed. The official report states that if it's a responsible member of staff was not on site, a much greater part of the site would have been destroyed. Apologies are given for this report, not for you to see, but if you consider it crucial to see this report, then perhaps you'd consider deferring the decision to another meeting. The other completely different issue is that of staff safety, and you heard how tragically a lone worker on another site of this company was killed, and that is why the company policy is not to allow lone working. In practice, the duty manager must be at hand. A duty manager must be on hand at all times. If the manager were to even live 10 minutes drive away, it would add much to the stress of the job. And this, of course, is a health matter. Now let's look at the viability considerations. In a busy period, 10 kilns have a 2.5 hour cycle out of normal working hours. The adjustments and checks take about 10 minutes. As lone working is not an option, a 3-person team is required, with all 3 living near the dryers to ensure there's always 2 people available for this 10-minute job at unsociable hours. The financial and practical reasons mean that these team members must be near the job. Economically, your decision this morning has economic implications for the area. This is a big business and a homegrown business, just the sort Boston is striving to encourage and to increase skill levels and average income of our workforce. It is a locally owned business, and the finances aren't being sucked away to some central corporate headquarters. You need to show support for this business. Now, the next matter is this question of the shed, which has been described to you. The shed, and I'll remind you, it's 30 metres long by 18 metres wide and 9 metres high, and that is in the course of construction at the moment. But that shed is sited so that there is only 40 metres between the shed and the hedge. So that is the plot where this dwelling is due to be built. So it's basically an area of 40 metres by 40 metres. Now, as a person that has spent many years managing large acres of land in Lincolnshire, I can assure you that an area behind a shed 40 by 40, you can hardly turn a tractor around on it. So it's not a viable area to farm. And you can't say it's in open countryside because of that shed. So I think that's my final point. It's certainly not going to be encroaching on open countryside.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Anybody like to questions? So, Councillor Austin, are you available for questions?
Chairman, it might just need to see who the first question's for, and they could perhaps come forward first, and then
Oh, okay, we've got 3 to go. Yeah, okay, sorry. Right, so we're open to questions for the speakers, and Councillor Rylett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was more a point of clarification, really. We are being told that there's a large shed being constructed somewhere here, but it's not actually showing on the site plan. By what I'm looking at on that site plan, we're actually looking at building a house in open countryside. Could we be explained, please, where the shed is actually being erected?
Yeah, if I'll answer that question. I was going to pick it up shortly anyway. So if I go back to this slide, which sorry, when my mouse starts to work, shows the application site is here at the end of the row of properties here. This is the field here. The shed, in effect, is broadly just off the screen here. Oh. So if I just show that in more detail, it's broadly there, and that again is that was a separate consent for a shed for purposes, and is, you know, the relevance to this application. The application that we've got before us is an application for an essential workers dwelling. The fact that a shed has been consented, yes, there are material factors as has been portrayed by the speaker in terms of, you know, implying that there's development in that area, you will hide it, etc. But I just really wanted to clarify the point about open countryside. So the speakers have referred to this not being in open countryside. In terms of the local plan definition, it is in open countryside. That's the end of the matter.
Councillor Brown.
Chairman, I do appreciate these are all pertinent questions, but in terms of the procedure, this is meant to be questions just to the speakers. No. I think we had the clarification, and again, not irrelevant and wholly, you know, needed, fine. But I think if we just go back to the normal procedure, Chairman, just deal with questions to the speakers if there are any. There may not be, I'm not sure. And then all of these questions can be put to officers during the debate for that clarification to assist members in reaching determination.
Yeah, so any more questions? Councillor Pierpoint.
Can I ask the question, how many dwellings have you got on the site for workers currently? Because there's 2, and you're looking to add a 3rd one to make 3. Thank you. That's the Dorian.
Councillor Dorian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a question about the running of the business. I don't mind who answers it, and if legal services will tell me if it's allowed, either the applicant or the agent. I don't think it's for you, Councillor Austin. It's about the way because a lot's been made of the health and safety, and I'd like to know a little bit more about this sort of changeover where there's a 2.5-hour cycle of the 10 kilns, and then 3 people are needed to do something. So I'd just like to, yeah, please. Is that okay to ask that? Yeah. Could you just talk us through that and where the danger is?
So the government brought into play the Ready to Burn scheme, which came in, I think it was May last year, which meant that all firewood sold had to be below 20% moisture. So before that, we used to work to 22, 25, something like that. It was all right. Now means we have to put the stuff in the kilns for longer. And in order to try and reduce the drying time, we run the kilns slightly hotter. But that means you need to burn less fuel more regularly to keep the temperature in the kiln higher. If you load too much fuel in, you just create loads of smoke, and actually you lose heat rather than gain it. So it's one of those things of little and often. So they need to be there to monitor the temperature of the kilns, monitor the settings of the kilns for the moisture contents within the kilns, because there's air flaps, which, you know, you can't dry the wood too quickly. You've got to do it slowly. Otherwise you seal the outside and you don't bring the moisture out the middle. And you need to keep the kilns running at a constant 85 degrees or give or take. So that's what they're doing. They're going in to monitor the progress of the drying and the temperatures within the kilns, and refuel the boilers if necessary, you know, which you will do at some point.
So could you talk a little bit more about where the danger is? Like you talked about a fire in Norfolk where sadly a man lost his life.
So in Norfolk,
can
Yeah,
I
Karen.
finish the question? I'm really interested to know, you know, the A, the danger element, and B, why having someone on the site makes a difference. Like, could you talk about the fire alarm system, how that operates, what the type of event is that could happen here that happened in Norfolk that you're trying to prevent? I'm really just trying to get into the understanding that, please.
So in Norfolk, it was nothing to do with a kiln or a fire. It was a forklift accident, and basically a member of staff got off the forklift, walked behind it, and the forklift came back and pinned him up against the wall and killed him. That could easily happen at our site at Wibberton. We use forklifts. Forklifts are used to load the fuel into the boilers. It's not so much for a specific risk that we need 2 people there. It's the risk of only having 1 person there. You know, we just won't do it anymore. You know, I was actually present in Norfolk when that happened. It was me that found him, and I'd literally left the chat for half an hour. So, you know, it's something we just don't want to do anymore. You know, the kilns, just, you know, they need monitoring. You know, that's you need somebody there, and I'm not prepared to have 1 person on site. So.
I'd like to ask you a question, actually. These kilns, are they not automated? Have you not got temperature control on them and humidity control on them?
No, you can't do that with firewood drying, because it's too hot a process. If you're drying timber for boards, you're drying at a much lower temperature.
We control furnaces for steel and stuff. I'm sure we can. But anyway, but you obviously don't. And that's your choice of how you operate your business. Councillor Pierpoint.
The 2 dwellings you've already got on site, are they for key workers as well?
Yes.
And are they looking after these kilns, and are they doing all the jobs?
Yes.
So why do we need another?
Because if somebody goes on holiday, you've only got 1 person on site. So, you know, we've got 2 people who both want 4 weeks holiday a year, and that means you've got 8 weeks where you're having to bring somebody in from wherever, you know, and they're travelling a long way. And then if they don't turn up, it's a logistical nightmare, to put it mildly.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Welbury, please.
How many people do you have working for you in total?
At the moment, we're in our quiet time of year, so I think we've got 9 or 10, and that will go up to 12 to 14 during the winter.
So do those people, they obviously don't all live.
No. They live in Boston and Albuquerque and Frisney and all over.
So you do have staff amenities on site, restrooms and canteens.
We have a canteen on site, yeah. Yeah.
So why can't somebody come in on a night shift and look after the kilns? Because you've got amenities on site.
Well, there's not really anywhere for them to sleep, and you know,
So you don't work a shift pattern.
No.
You don't you know.
We have 2 people.
You don't have. I own a factory, so I work a shift pattern. My factory's open 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
I too cannot have single working.
Yeah.
We have forklifts and the like.
Yeah.
So we have about 6 people running through the night, up to 6 people. But I make amenities available to those people so that they're comfortable, and that's their shift pattern. They are night workers. That's not possible in your industry.
Well, not really, because you've got to take the cost into consideration, and you're thinking they've got to do maybe 4 or 5 checks during the night, which take 10 minutes. And what you're proposing is to, instead of having a member of staff that starts at 7 or 8 in the morning and finishes at 5 or 6, that they then work from say 5 o'clock till 8 o'clock in the morning to do 40 minutes work. It's not practical.
I'm just trying to understand your business. So, you know, to me, that would be an alternative.
Councillor
to having
Welbury, just
somebody running
focus on the questions. Your comments are all relevant, but in the debate, just focus on questions for clarification.
And then I have another question, Mr. Chairman. The actual shed or warehouse, that, I mean, it's a stupid question, maybe. That is your shed, warehouse. It doesn't belong to another company.
No.
And what is being stored in that?
Tractors at the moment, tractors and straw bales. Well, it will be. It's not actually finished yet. They're in the process of finishing. It'll be finished the end of this week.
Right. Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Austin.
If I may question Mr. Jenkins. You don't make any reference. I'm surprised, shall I say, that you don't seem to make any reference to the fire in, well, there isn't any in this report. Was this just an omission? Because, or do you consider that was a one-off sort of situation that would never happen again? You know, what caused that fire?
Councillor Austin, is this relevant to this situation?
I would consider that it is with firewood. I want to know, you know, it's not like steel, I'm afraid. Wood burns, steel doesn't.
The honest answer is we don't actually know what caused the fire, because the area where the fire started was so burnt that there was no way of ascertaining how the fire actually started. So it is open to interpretation. The fire brigade had no reason to suspect arson and no reason not to suspect arson, or you know, it was left as an unknown. So.
Councillor Dorian.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm still trying to understand the how your factory operates, in all honesty. So this 10-minute changeover that needs 2 or 3 people, do they come out their houses, their tied houses, to do that throughout the night?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Literally walk out the back door, cross the yard, check there's five sets of boilers which need checking. They check them and go back again, and refuel them if they need it, or whatever needs doing, they would do at that time. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Staples.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to ask, these houses, are they just for employees only, or are they, I mean, a 4-bedroom house to me indicates that would be for a family.
Yes,
so that whole families live there.
Yes. Yeah.
So do you deem the site safe for the possibility of children running around?
Then they're not living amongst the machinery, so to speak. You know, they're at the site. Yeah.
Separate, yeah. Okay.
It's no different to us having a neighbour. You know.
Yeah. Just thinking the point of view of safety. Thank you.
Okay. Carry on.
I just want to make, I just want to ask Councillor Austin about a comment he mentioned about the sustainability of this business. So I'm not sure whether firewood business is environmentally friendly and kind of could be considered as a sustainable option. Just a quick question.
To me?
No, to Councillor Austin, I think.
Can you repeat the question? I didn't quite hear it.
I thought I heard you mentioning this was a sustainable business. So just wanted a clarification.
Well, the reason that why this decision is so important to the sustainability of the business is because it needs this sort of detailed management, and without it, the business isn't going to prosper, and you know, it'll have to possibly even move away from the area. So you know, it is for the sake of our local economy, I feel we need to support this application.
Sorry, my question was whether this is a sustainable business in terms of environmental sustainability. I didn't, I mean, I probably misunderstood what you said at the beginning.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you like to answer that?
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
So firewood or wood fuels biomass in general, yes, is a sustainable source of heating, power, whatever. Obviously, it's being promoted to replace coal, oil, gas. We have woodland growing initiatives in Lincolnshire, which we harvest woodland and take that back for processing into firewood, which is then distributed out. So yes, it is an environmentally sustainable business, and obviously the heating using biomass fuel is carbon neutral. So in that respect, I would say it is, but obviously I'll have to leave that to your own judgment.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Pierpoint.
Can I just ask Mr. Jenkins to go back to the table? Sorry. What impact would this have on your business if this application was refused?
I definitely won't be able to grow any more than what I have done. And with the hassle we had this winter trying to keep running, probably we would have to look at cutting back our operation, if I'm quite honest, because it was testing at best, to say the least. Yeah.
Okay. Jyoti.
About the flood risk, I just wanted to ask whether the flood risk issues was it applicable to the buildings already built?
Is this to the agent?
Could Giles answer that?
Yes,
yes. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, the house is exactly to compliant standards with the flood risk. Now, I'm not sure why the Environment Agency wrote what they did, because the floor level is raised to exactly what they asked for on Ash Lodge, and there is no sleeping accommodation downstairs. It's a 2-storey house, and when you do the sequential test, which is to find out whether there is any land in flood zone 1 or 2 within a radius of it, it came out negative, and it was in the flood risk assessment, which was actually sent to you but not passed on. So I'm sorry about that.
Okay, Councillor Waldery.
Does that apply to the shed? I don't know. Do the flood?
No, tractors don't mind being flooded.
So expensive pieces of kit that cost thousands and
Yep.
thousands of pounds.
Those are just the rules. Commercial building.
I'm new to this.
It's if you are sleeping, it is, you know, it's like liable. You're liable to get drowned when you're sleeping. So if it's upstairs, you don't get drowned, but you have to lift the floor levels up to the set level which the Environment Agency set above ordnance datum 0.65 or whatever, to prevent flooding into your house.
I understand that. I just wondered about the shed. Thank you.
Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we've moved on from questions of the speakers, so I just wanted to clarify on a couple of points that I've heard so far. So just picking up the last point for Councillor Welbury, in terms of the shed, yes, the flood risk is a consideration, but essentially it's a less vulnerable use compared to a residential property. The tests that you have to go through in effect for a residential property are much higher. The flood risk situation hasn't massively moved on from 2016, albeit the policy is slightly different from how it is now. But fundamentally, we have a standing objection from the Environment Agency against this application because the flood risk assessment in their mind is not technically compliant. They are our technical experts. We are taking their steer on that. And in terms of the sequential test, it has not been accompanied by a successful sequential test. I believe one was submitted at the very last minute to try and demonstrate that it has. But again, it would need to go through that effectively sign off by the Environment Agency as our technical advisors. Just coming back on, I know a number of the questions that members have had to the speakers and some of the comments that have been made are about how the business operates, the health and safety, the viability, the economic, fundamentally, what is the justification for this dwelling? And from the local plan perspective, we're dealing with a site in the open countryside where, in line with national policy, development should only be allowed if it's to kind of meet those exceptional requirements. In effect, it's a very constrained area for development, and we're looking at the test of whether or not there is an essential need for this dwelling. Now, years ago, that would have been in the form of stringent. You need to prove financial viability of the business. You need to provide a detailed information of the business need, things like a business plan, etc., etc. Then you would go through proving that with a temporary dwelling for a period of time. And then after a while, you'd move on to a permanent dwelling. That's how a number of farm workers' dwellings have arrived over a period of time. The government have relaxed the rules ever so slightly. So they have used this term now, essential, and it is a much more rounded test. But in terms of the application that we have before us, and I've reviewed it this morning while we've been in the meeting, the justification statement is 20 lines long. You've heard more this morning from the speakers and across the board than is in the application that has come before us. So we haven't been able to test that as the local planning authority. We haven't been able to examine that. There is no detail of a business plan. There is no information that's been provided to us confidentially that sets out, financially why this is required. There is no real understanding of why, how the business operates in terms of that turnover, why temporary options on site can't be used. You've heard, for example, that there are dwellings already on the site that are tied. And the argument is that when people go away on holiday, there is no one there. Well, the question we would put back as officers is to say, well, why can't somebody move into that dwelling for that 2 or 3 week period while somebody's there? The building is there to facilitate the business use as a residential property. It's not there to facilitate the needs of a particular employee or a particular employee. So from the local planning authority's perspective, the recommendation that is before you is based upon the application as it was presented to us up until everything you've heard this morning. The weight that you want to give to all of the representations that have been made is entirely up to you. But from an officer's perspective, we have 3 reasons for refusal on this scheme. One, that we don't believe it has been demonstrated necessary for another dwelling in this location, particularly bearing in mind the planning history where you can see there are a number of dwellings that have also been granted in a countryside location. We've got a flood risk issue that needs to be resolved. And then we've got a character and appearance issue that even if you could get over the principal issues, we have concerns about another dwelling, another built form in effectively a countryside location, bearing in mind, as you can see on the slide before you, the existing buildings almost form a nice rounded cluster, and then this would be expanding into the field. That in a very short summary is how officers have arrived at the recommendation that is before you, and hopefully that assists in terms of moving forward. Councillor Brown, you raised a question about is this agricultural tied? If we were to get to a position where we had put forward a recommendation recommending approval for the dwelling, we would look to impose a condition so that we don't have a completely unrestricted dwelling in the countryside. And we would look to that restriction to follow a similar pattern to those for the other dwellings that have been granted in that location. But from an officer perspective, we're a very long way from where that is, and hence the report before you. I'll say no more and hopefully leave it over to members to have a debate.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Pierpoint.
In my personal opinion, because you presented the information that we haven't got in front of us, and because for some unknown reason, I don't know why it hasn't arrived at this office, I prefer to defer this application because I actually don't feel that I'm really in the know of what's going on. Only what we've been given by the officers, but you're giving us additional information which hasn't been in front of us. So I personally can't sort of refuse this application or take it any further. I'd rather defer it. That's my personal opinion.
If Councillor Pierpoint is moving that we defer it, I would be very happy to support that because there is just so much not in this application. I mean, I looked at the meeting, the application itself. There's so much not in here. No mention, I'm going back on this, of a fire. And I deplore the thought that if, in one hand, Mike, Mr. Goldsleeves, you're saying, well, it's someone's home, but then saying, right, when you go on holiday, someone else can move into your home. I'm sorry, that is not acceptable. is it?
In
If
your
it's your
opinion.
family home, then it's your family home. And when you go on holiday, it's still your family home. And I think that is absolutely, it's immoral, I think, to make that sort of suggestion. I'm sorry.
Thank you
Right,
very
so
much.
I would be very happy to support, second your proposal.
Okay. Councillor Dorian.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I didn't find Mr Gildersleeve's proposal immoral. I didn't agree with it, but I didn't think it was immoral. I think, and under the letter of the law, it's probably talking a lot of sense. Mr Chair, I found the applicant's arguments very compelling, and on a different day with a different report, I would be minded to approve your application. However, I do think that there are outstanding issues that need to be addressed. And I agree with Councillor Pierpoint that it needs to be deferred and allow the applicant time to, pardon the pun, put his house in order and bring back a report which addresses the issues that we've raised today. And in particular, I am really, really keen to see the flood risk addressed. Whether you're going to raise the flow levels even more than they are now, I don't know, but it's got to align with what the Environment Agency have asked for. It really has, because we cannot, I'm very much against passing stuff that could present a risk to life, very much against that. So for those reasons, like I said, it was a compelling argument. I've already argued in support of the local plan. I think in this occasion, I would sleep comfortably knowing that we've departed from the local plan because of allowing this business to flourish and develop even further. So I support the deferment. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Rylett.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I think my main concern about this development was that it was encroaching onto open countryside, like the planners have rightly said. Is there nowhere else on that site? There looks as if there's a lot of green space on that site that another property could not be located if they desperately need people to be living on that site. Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
Legal services.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Legal Services would like to comment.
Thank you, Chairman and Vice Chairman. I heard what members have said, all very relevant. It obviously at the minute you've got a proposal on the table for deferral. Fine. Just when, and I'm sure this was covered in the training, so apologies if I'm telling you something you only discussed last night, but obviously when you defer a matter, obviously you have to give the detailed reasons of what it is you're seeking from the deferral, which you've done so far, great. But just bear in mind, obviously, that there are 3 reasons for refusal. The last one being about the character and appearance of the area. Now, obviously, members have already discussed what more information they would require in terms of the justification and the need for the dwelling. And Councillor Dorian just talked about the flood risk. So, you know, sort of that they want more information. When it comes back, you obviously at that point, you are only going to discuss the information that's been given. So you obviously at this point in this meeting need to also turn your hand. And I think Councillor Ryland just sort of started touching on it about her concerns about open countryside, about whether the proposal as proposed, not amended to another green space, you know, what members' opinion is about the impact it would have on character, and appearance, and whether that's acceptable, or whether as part of your deferral you need some more information about that. Because if you are silent on it, potentially you are saying that that's acceptable at this point and it couldn't then be raised as an issue next time. So members just want to make sure that they're in their debate today, they are quite thorough in all of their concerns, not just highlighting the information that they don't have.
Can I just ask you a point there then? Would we be better off refusing today, but encourage them to come back with a more complete application?
If I can pick that up, Mr. Chairman, there's no right or wrong answer to that question. It's whichever way members want to take it. Just to elaborate on Martha's point, you know, to give an example, you know, would changes to the dwelling make members feel more comfortable? Or are you happy with the dwelling? Or, as Councillor Rylett has said, would you like some more information about other locations that have been looked at for the potential positioning of that dwelling? and either it moved if it could be accommodated in one of those locations, or the information to say why it can't be accommodated in those locations brought as part of the package.
So what was the answer?
And it's entirely for members. You've got a proposal for deferral, and you've got a recommendation before you that is one of refusal. There is no right or wrong in terms of that solution. If members want to defer, that's absolutely fine.
Chairman, sorry, if I just add, one of the considerations is that if you defer, obviously with every planning applications, there's a period of time with which the council has to determine it. So at this point, you have to make that determination, and that can be extended. Obviously, so we would need to, potentially be mindful of that date if we defer to next month's committee, or it might be the information isn't available for next month's committee. And the only thing to bear in mind is if the applicant didn't agree to extend the time limit to the next committee or whenever the information was ready, they could then go to appeal on non-determination, and at which point the council would lose their ability to make a determination because they didn't make it in time. So again, there is no right or wrong answer, but it is again just a consideration for you that if the applicant didn't agree to keep extending the time to allow that information to come forward, they could then appeal non-determination as opposed to actually a refusal or approval. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. That gives steer for what the committee are looking for from the applicant to be able to consider that more fully next time. That's perfect. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Staples.
Thank you, Chair. I just feel actually a site visit is necessary. Does it help us determine?
Why? We would need some details, sorry.
Yes, to actually see the location, where the shed is going to be, where the proposed dwelling is going to be, so that we can actually see it, and then visualise it and have a better understanding. Because I think things are just so up in the air and so incomplete, really.
Okay, Councillor Pierpoint.
Because of the situation we are faced with the report and also the information that you provided, I'm confused and not really clear on this application. That's why I'd rather defer it. And I probably agree with Councillor Staples that perhaps a site visit would give us a better understanding, because looking at little dots on the screen here isn't always very good. I would like to see where this other building's being built. I think the bigger picture for us to understand a better of your application is probably better for us all here, because I think we're trying to sort of decide something with them in the dark.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Ryan.
I think there's also got to be some, sorry, Mr. Chair, questions. Have we got all the information from flood risk assessments? My concern now is we've built a new shed. Have we built a new shed now so that we're going to grow even more? We've got a field here.
And then a house.
And then a house, and then another house. How long is this going to carry on for? It does concern me.
Can I try and sum up? I'm not an expert, and please jump in, officers, and put me straight if I'm wrong. If we were to refuse this, but I mean, there's a lot of sympathy around this table for your application. Nobody wants to see a good business suffer because of a decision. But I seem to think that deferring it causes more complications. So are we better off refusing and saying, please come back with a more complete proposal? Is that a reasonable way forward, or is it?
Obviously, if the committee refuses today, then obviously the applicant has a right of appeal. We can't tell them or require them to submit a new application that you then can determine. And equally, they could come back with the same application with the same amount of, an identical application if they so wish, with no additional information. So again, unfortunately, there's not really a right or wrong answer. If you think that there is the information in the ether, I think perhaps that could come forward that would assist, then potentially, the committee leaning towards deferral, might be a way to go and to deal with it that avoids then a potential appeal. You know, obviously then committee do still have all options on the table next time in terms of either going with the officer's recommendation. It might be the officer's recommendation evolves, you know, in light of the information, and they come forward with approval, but you've got approval and refusal on the table still next time.
All right. So where are we as far as time constraints on this then? From the application point of view, how much time have we got to get it back in here and discussed again if we defer? Yeah.
So as you'll have heard, applications have a statutory determination period. It would be 8 weeks on this application. We can agree that by extension. Given that the applicant is here with his agent, I don't think they would be adverse to agreeing an extension of time to enable the package of information that members have alluded to come forward, and for us to bring it back to committee. I think bearing in mind where we are now, deadlines for next agenda, etc., we're probably going to miss the next meeting, but it would be the meeting after. But I think given the nods from the back of the room, I wouldn't necessarily say it would be difficult for us to agree an extension of time. And I'm more than happy that members have given enough of a steer in terms of wanting some more information around the justification, the flood risk, the other locations that a dwelling could be located on site, the distances and relationships with the shed. And we can then, once we've got that information, what will then happen is officers would consider that. Our recommendation may stay the same, it may change, but then we would ultimately bring it back to committee for determination. I just want to pick up on the point of a site visit. You should have all the information to enable you to make an informed decision. You've got site photographs in front of you. So there is all of that information. We can supplement that a bit more next time. So I don't necessarily think a site visit is going to add anything further. The core crux of this is getting some more information from the applicant to enable us to provide you with that full context. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Councillor Doyle was first.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just to ask if Mr. Jenkins was agreeable to deferment. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Just a question to you. You said we've got all the information, but we don't. We only learnt about this shed today. That's not actually in any of your photographs or any of your plans. And to me, that's quite a big thing, because as Councillor Rylett said, that looks like this business is doing well. It would like to expand. You've actually understood that and given that permission, you know, but yet it's not in any of our paperwork. So that's quite a big point for me, that I feel a little bit nervous now about the decisions that you're actually making, because I don't feel I've had the full information.
I can clarify that very, very simply. It was a prior notification application. It is of not direct relevance. It's not part of the application that is before you. Therefore, it is not referenced in the site history. It is part of the wider context that it has come forward. It's come forward as an agricultural shed for use in connection with the land under permitted development. So it's not unusual for it not to have been referenced in this way, but certainly as part of the next iteration of the report, we can certainly have it there as part of the report and part of the presentation, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay.
I just find that a bit odd. Sorry, you know, as I'm new to this, I don't know, but that to me is quite a big thing.
Okay.
So
I think at the time that you make the decision, so obviously that's not going to be today in respect to this application, but will be at the next meet. Well, I think the meeting after next. But you know, once all the additional information is submitted. But what we mean by is generally speaking, in respect of any planning application. So obviously, like for instance, even the other two that you've determined today, at the point you make the decision, you should have all the information, and the information presented to you through the officer's report, the presentation with the photographs of the slides is and should be sufficient for members to make a determination considering all relevant material considerations. Where a debate topic is sort of drawn out and discussed by members, like for instance today the shed has come to light and that becomes new information, then of course it's relevant that you should have the information of that before you. So that's why the option of deferral exists within the planning remit to allow you to do that. In terms of a site visit, that's a little bit akin to a deferral, because obviously you wouldn't make a decision today, you would go on a site visit and then bring it back to determine it. But the site visits would be for if something came out through considering the item that is only able to be experienced in context and fully given that material weight in person. So for instance, in this instance, what the shed looks like, the proximity of the shed to the proposed dwelling and the business, etc., could all be borne out through the slides and the presentation. So you will have all the relevant information to be able to determine that application at the next meeting without needing to necessarily go on a site visit, in my opinion. The site visits, and I'm trying to find a really good example, but on the hoof I'm struggling, but it's, for instance, perhaps akin to the auction house, to go in, for instance, experience to traffic on an auction day. Now, actually, in that instance, that's a rubbish example because the officer provided excellent photographs of the traffic, but you know, there are some things that can only be experienced in person. I would agree with officers that in this instance, the location, the design, the size of the shed, for instance, to give you that character and impact on amenity of this dwelling could be evidenced via slides, and therefore a site visit isn't necessarily necessary, in my opinion. I hope that assists just generally. Thank you.
Okay, can we start to draw this to a conclusion? We seem to be going over old ground a lot. So do you want to speak? Yeah?
Thank you. I'm actually concerned about deferring because like Councillor Welbury mentioned, the site shed has come into picture now, and this shed is probably storing the equipment which is used for the business rather than the farm equipment. We don't know. So what is the connection? So are we not better off refusing at this instance and then getting the application again?
Through yourself, Mr. Chairman, as I say, I'm comfortable with a deferral, given the issues that have been raised. Equally, if members want to look at refusal, then that's up to them. We did not consider that when you look at the location, the use, etc., for the shed, it has no significant material bearing on the application that's before us. But we can provide more information on that if the application is deferred. The applicant clearly has a differing view to what we do as planning officers. That's a matter of planning judgment. So I'm happy whether it's a deferral or a refusal, as discussed earlier.
Okay, Councillor Broughton.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say, with deferring it, is that not going to put Mr. Is it Jenkins? Sorry, in a spot, because he said earlier on if it was refused that it would have an impact on him later on in the year. Well, if we're deferring it, surely it's making whether it gets accepted or refused longer and longer, and therefore putting Mr. Jenkins in a difficult position. Maybe.
If I can just quickly respond on that point, it's a valid point, Councillor Broughton. It's one for discussion, but I think given that Mr. Jenkins indicated that he'd be happy to an extension of time to allow us to defer and come back, I think you can take that with some confidence that they will provide the information that officers would then go back and request on behalf of the committee.
So we're looking. So if everybody's happy, they've finished the discussion. We're looking for a proposer that's to.
I've got a proposal. Yes,
but there's some conditions and subject to an extension of what period of time?
So if I can just summarise, in terms of that extension of time, we would have to have that discussion with the applicants because it would depend on how quickly they can get the information back to us. We won't unduly withhold it coming back to committee. It's not in our interest. It's not in the applicants. So as it stands, as I understand it, we have a proposal from Councillor Pierpoint, seconded by Councillor Austin, for a deferral of the application, with various requests for information having come from the floor, including information around the flood risk and a satisfactory flood risk assessment with the Environment Agency being satisfied. More justification around the business and some of the matters that have been heard today, the business operation and the need for the dwelling. Consideration of other locations on the site that the dwelling could be sited, and some more detail around the shed, its use, its measurements, its location, and how that relates to the site in question. Does that adequately summarise for yourself, Councillor Pierpoint and Councillor Austin?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so can we move now to a vote? Right, all those in favour of that proposal? Well, a proposal to defer.
That's 10, Chairman.
10.
Yeah.
And those against?
11, thank you. That's all right. It's already left the meeting, Chairman.
All right. Okay. Where does that leave us? Near the bloody end, I think. Excuse my mate. Okay, people, can we just come back to order quickly? So, have you finished, Councillor Austin? No, no, I'm trying to close it. That concludes the business of this meeting. My thanks to all the committee members along with the supporting officers. And I look forward to seeing you all at our next scheduled meeting, which is at 10 o'clock on Tuesday, the 18th of July. And thank you, everybody, for keeping me on track. Thank you.
Just reminding the members to stay seated.
Oh, could everybody just stay seated whilst they close down the street?